The town of Islip presents Can Suffolk Be Saved? A 10-part environmental series. Tonight's program, Before the Tide.
This is a series about growth, about development, about sprawl, about what's happened to Suffolk County in the last several years, in the last couple of hundred years, and its prospects for the future. A line could be drawn from Boston down through southern Connecticut, through New York City, down Jersey, and through Maryland to Washington, D.C., and be regarded as a megalopolis line, the East Coast megalopolis. At this point in 1974, on each side of that line for about 40 miles, 50 miles, is sprawl. Suffolk County has been mostly excluded from the spread of the sprawl up to recent years. An island jutting out into the Atlantic, it just wasn't along the main thoroughfares. It was a dead end. It was exempt. But as the sprawl has gone further and further, 40, 45, 50, 55 miles, even Suffolk County, a very, very delicate landmass, is becoming enmeshed. The question we pose in the series is whether Suffolk County can be saved, or whether it's going to be consumed like all the rest of the land along that megalopolis line. We start this show on Gardiner's Island, a time capsule, a place like all of Long Island was before any man, any white man, came. It's a privately held island where the public is not allowed. Later on in the show, we'll look at Connequot River State Park, another place on Long Island in Oakdale, where time has more or less stood still. It's a state park, but a very unusual state park, a place where people can go in very small numbers on tours to again see what the island was before humankind came in large numbers. And lastly, we'll go to Carmen's River, another unspoiled part of Long Island, but its future is more up in the air. The point is that Suffolk County isn't just a couple of hundred square miles of prairie. It's an extraordinarily delicate place, a place which held enormous bounty. And if it is consumed by that sprawl, it'll be gone forever. Robert David Lyon Gardiner, the 14th Lord of the Manor of Gardiner's Island. The original Gardiner, when did he come here and why did he come here?
He came to America in 1635 to build forts in New England against the Dutch, who were then in New Amsterdam. And he was the first military engineer to be sent by the War Office for that purpose, to defend the British Empire such as it was, namely Massachusetts Bay Colony.
How come this island? Why did they go to this island?
He was on a 4-year contract. He didn't come here to emigrate like most people. And his letter is still extant to the War Office. He said, "Me lords, I would fain brave all the savages of the New World than go back across that dreadful Atlantic. So I bought an island of mine own from the Indian, Chief Wyandanch, and I should humbly petition His Majesty to grant it to me." So it was made the first lordship and manor in America.
The Gardiner family, for many years, ran this place as sort of a self-contained...
plantation. We had our own blacksmith shop. We made our own ironware, locks, hammers, hinges, burly blacksmiths, manned the forge. You can see the forge there today, and the anvil. The windmills ground the grain. There were 5 windmills on the island. In its heyday, there was one that was built only to last 2 years, which was to saw the mahogany we brought from the Honduras across the Caribbean and up the coast of Florida, up to Montauk Point and around here. And I have beautiful dining room tables that were made from that mahogany. And we had sawmills that were powered by the windmill, which were strapped by the cowhide straps, and with reduction gears operated the sawmills with the wind power. Also looms. The tens of thousands of sheep on the island, the women would card the wool of the sheep into thread on spinning wheels, and then it was spun. Then the windmills operated looms, and the shuttles went back and forth and actually wove homespun coats for our servants to have wool coats in the winter. And they were made here on the island. I even have blankets that were made, Gardiner's Island wool made into blankets.
It was a self-sufficient place then.
Well, yes, we had orchards down this hill. There were pear orchards and apple orchards. Unfortunately, the fruit trees do not last long, but in East Hampton they still have Gardiner's Island peach trees, descended from the peaches here. This island represents America before Columbus discovered it. It's had the least use by man. It was the most destructive creature on this planet. For hundreds of years, we have used this as a private estate. Luckily, we've had no fire in the virgin oak forest, which is the largest one left on the Atlantic seaboard. We have approximately 1,000 deer, which we have to shoot to reduce the herd to 700. We have to shoot 300 every year. Unfortunately, the does know nothing about the pill, and the result is the herd increases. There are no wolves as there used to be here. I couldn't get Mrs. Mackey to stay in the house if there were wolves around here. And I don't mean the other kind, I mean the wolves that howl.
This is a very bountiful place. It's a place of milk and honey.
There were 5 freshwater streams. That's why my ancestor got it. The only island that had freshwater streams. We didn't even need a pump to pump the water up. The water, fresh water, flowed on the surface of the ground. It was a paradise for his family. The animals could drink that water. We had it today for lunch. There's no chlorine in it. It's crystal clear. You can drink out of the stream. There are sponges in the ponds that don't exist on the mainland anymore because of pollutants, detergents. Here, it is just as clean as it was 300 years ago. And because there are few people that live here, only 3 families all year round.
It's sort of like a time capsule then as to what Long Island was before.
A complete time capsule. You've got some oaks that have been growing since before Columbus discovered America. They're still growing. They're second only to the redwoods in California. We have quail, we have wild turkey, and they're so much better eating than the barnyard turkey you get in the supermarket. These have never eaten corn. They've only eaten acorns and berries. The meat is tender, it's not coarse. And the birds are much smaller, of course. They fly like pheasants. They're a tough shot to shoot.
There's strawberry and there's apples.
Strawberries, there are wild blackberries here, of course, that wild turkey love to eat, wineberries, grapes, lots of wild grapes. We make jelly, eat with the venison when we eat the venison steaks and the chops. And once I ran out of eggs here, and I had 4 ambassadors in the house, and I had a few eggs, and the rest was deer's brains, and they looked sure as could be like scrambled eggs. So I managed to have enough eggs for breakfast. Nobody knew it until afterwards, and then I told them they were eating deer's brains.
When you think of this island, it's an unspoiled paradise, as you say, and you look at the rest of Long Island right out there and what's happened to it in the last couple of hundred years, what do you think about?
Well, I think it's tragic. We seem to be engulfed in a debris of plastic which never breaks down. And there are Coke containers and plastic bottles of Clorox and detergent. And it's tragic. Even on the beach here, you get all these plastic containers washed up by the sea, and they just don't disintegrate. It's like DDT. We never sprayed this island with DDT, only once. The federal government sprayed against gypsy moth in the 50s. I was furious. But the ospreys here are really, it's their only chance to survive because we have more in one place in the world than any other place. On this island, we have 40 nests, and we've had 28 young hatched this year.
When the first gardeners came to this country, that would be in the 17th century.
Yeah, the early part of
the early part of the 17th.
We've owned this island over a third of 1,000 years, 335 years.
It must have been, compared to where they came from, compared to the old world, an enormously bountiful place.
Oh, yes. There, for instance, there are lobsters in the rocks. There are oysters. There are clams. There are the most marvelous mussels. And it's a shame what has happened to it in the last 50 years.
Well, what's happened to it in the last 50 years?
It's this incredible pollution. It's the detergents and these terrible sprays, insecticides, which are on the vegetables. You see, my grandparents would like apples from my orchard even if they had a wormhole in them. But the trouble is that the average American housewife going to a supermarket wants the apples to look like red plastics, or the tomatoes. They don't want a defect which is normal in nature.
At this rate, what do you think Gardener's Island will look like in 100 years?
Well, I want to try and fence it in as much as possible so it would be prevented from being used as, well, of course, development out, but a federal park was out. Mr. Pike wanted to do that, and it was not the way to preserve it, because a federal park you simply cannot prevent people from using. And if you have 10,000 people a day here, you would absolutely ruin it within the first month.
In 100 years, though, after you and I are gone.
Well, I think it should be in a foundation, in a very restricted use as a ecological gem that it is, with its forests and its lakes, with their aquatic life, and the forest with the reptiles, the snakes, and the turtles, and the wildlife, the wonderful bird sanctuary that it is, and the old buildings should be preserved, some of them older than Williamsburg. And this is part of American history, and the portraits and the silver and the deeds. I would like to put a fireproof vault here and have it open for students, but not to the general public, because if you had thousands of people here a day, the toilet facilities alone would pollute the streams. The ecology is far too delicately balanced to withstand a gross invasion of humans.
Well, it's like the rest of Long Island, really, no?
Yes. The thing is that there are certain areas, I think, in America that should be preserved, and this is one.